Admiral Zethkar adjusted his four arms across the tactical display as the Galactic Imperial fleet moved through hyperspace toward the Sol system. The massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion hummed with the power of engines that could crack moons. Around him, his bridge crew worked with the practiced efficiency of a military force that had conquered 47 star systems without a single defeat. "Admiral," his tactical officer announced, "we are approaching the human homeworld. Their defensive fleet appears to be modest." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in amusement. The humans had been discovered 3 months ago by a routine scouting expedition. Intelligence reports painted them as a young species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Their technology was primitive, their military apparently focused on what they called peacekeeping rather than true warfare. "Display their defensive positions," Zethkar commanded. The holographic display showed Earth floating serenely in space, protected by a handful of space stations and perhaps 24 vessels of the humans optimistically called warships. The entire defensive force wouldn't have been enough to challenge a single Imperial battlecruiser, let alone the 100-ship armada now approaching their world. "Sir," Communications Officer Veltan spoke up, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting negotiations." "Of course they are," Zethkar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Put them through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human male in what appeared to be a blue and white uniform. The creature looked remarkably fragile, with soft skin and only 2 arms. No visible armor plating, no natural weapons, no impressive size. Zethkar had seen more threatening livestock on agricultural worlds. "I am Admiral Marcus Chun of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said. "On behalf of humanity, I formally request that you withdraw from our system. We have no quarrel with your empire." Zethkar's officers broke into chittering laughter across the bridge. The admiral raised one hand for silence before responding. "Human Admiral Chun, I am Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Imperial Navy. You will surrender your world immediately and prepare your population for processing. Resistance will only result in unnecessary casualties." Admiral Chen's expression remained steady. "I'm afraid we cannot comply with that demand. Humanity will defend our homeworld." "With what?" Zethkar gestured toward the tactical display. "Your primitive ships? Your outdated weapons? My intelligence reports indicate your species has an aversion to true military conflict. You have not fought a major war in decades. Your military exists primarily for what you call humanitarian missions." "Your intelligence is partially correct," Chen admitted. "We do prefer peace. But you've made a critical error in your assessment." "And what error would that be?" Chen leaned forward slightly. "You assume that because we prefer peace, we are incapable of war. You assume that because we choose diplomacy, we fear battle. Let me introduce you to a concept your intelligence clearly missed." The admiral's screen split, showing a new figure alongside Chen. This human wore different clothing, a green uniform with various insignia. Where Chun appeared diplomatic, this new human radiated something different. Something that made Zethkar's combat instincts stir uneasily. "This is General Sarah Rodriguez, Commandant of the United States Marine Corps," Chun continued. "Perhaps you'd like to hear her perspective on our supposed fear of battle." General Rodriguez stepped forward. "Admiral Zethkar, is it? I want you to understand something. The Marines under my command are volunteers. Every single one chose to serve. They chose to train harder than your soldiers can imagine. They chose to learn skills your empire has forgotten. Most importantly, they chose to swear an oath that means more to them than their own lives." "Impressive word from such a small creature," Zethkar replied dismissively. "But words cannot stop plasma cannons or gravity bombs." "You're right," Rodriguez agreed. "Words can't, but actions can." "Admiral Chun, permission to demonstrate human military capabilities?" "Granted, General." Rodriguez turned to someone off-screen. "Colonel Martinez, launch Operation Semper Fi." Zethkar frowned at the unfamiliar term, but his confusion was short-lived. Across the tactical display, new contacts began appearing throughout the Sol system. Ships that had been completely invisible to Imperial sensors suddenly revealed themselves. They weren't large vessels, but there were hundreds of them, and they were moving with a precision that spoke of extensive training and planning. "Impossible," breathed the tactical officer. "Sir, they were using some form of advanced stealth technology. Our sensors showed nothing." "How many ships?" Zethkar demanded. "Sir, initial count shows over 300 contacts. They appear to be smaller vessels, but they're moving in coordinated attack formations." On the communication screen, General Rodriguez smiled coldly. "You see, Admiral, your intelligence made another mistake. You assumed that because our main fleet is small, it represents our total military capability. What you didn't account for is that humans don't just fight in space. We fight everywhere. In the air, on land, underwater, and yes, in space. Every environment where battle can occur, we've learned to dominate it." The tactical display suddenly erupted with missile launches. Thousands of projectiles streaked toward the Imperial fleet from every direction. But these weren't ordinary missiles. They moved too fast, turned too sharply, and seemed to anticipate the Imperial ship's evasive maneuvers. "Point defense systems online." Zethkar roared. All ships returned fire. The Imperial fleet's massive weapons began firing, sending streams of plasma and particle beams toward the approaching missiles. Some were destroyed, but far too many got through. When they struck Imperial ships, the results were devastating. Hull plating that could withstand conventional weapons cracked and ruptured. Shields that had never failed began collapsing under the precise impacts. "Sir," the damage control officer reported, "these aren't conventional weapons. The missiles appear to be using focused antimatter warheads with some form of adaptive targeting system. They're specifically designed to penetrate our shield configurations." Zethkar stared at the display in growing disbelief. "How do they know our shield frequencies?" General Rodriguez's voice carried across the bridge with disturbing clarity. "Because we've been watching you, Admiral. For the past 3 months, we've been studying every signal your scouting ships transmitted, every energy signature, every tactical pattern. You thought you were observing a primitive species. In reality, you were teaching us how to kill you." The human fleet moved like nothing Zethkar had ever encountered. The smaller ships worked in perfect coordination, using hit and run tactics that kept them ahead of the Imperial guns while their missiles continued to find their targets with surgical precision. But what truly unnerved the Admiral was the way they fought. There was no panic, no confusion, no desperate last stand. The humans fought with a cold, calculated efficiency that spoke of extensive training and unshakable discipline. "Sir, the cruiser Bloodfang is reporting critical damage to their main reactor," the communications officer announced. "The destroyer Ironclaw has lost primary weapons. Captain Mordak is requesting permission to withdraw." "Withdraw." Zethkar's voice rose to a roar. "We outnumber them 4-1. Our ships are larger, our weapons more powerful." "Numbers don't matter if you can't hit your target," Rodriguez commented. "And size just makes you easier to see. Admiral, you're fighting Marines now. We don't retreat. We don't surrender. We adapt, we overcome, and we win." On the tactical display, something new appeared. A wave of even smaller contacts emerged from what appeared to be empty space near Jupiter's moons. These vessels were tiny compared to even the human attack ships, but they moved with incredible speed and agility. "Fighter craft," the tactical officer reported grimly. "Hundreds of them. Sir, they're not attacking our ships directly. They appear to be targeting our point defense systems." Zethkar watched in growing horror as the tiny human fighters wove through his fleet's defensive fire with impossible skill. They struck with pinpoint accuracy, taking out gun emplacements and sensor arrays with weapons that seemed designed specifically for the task. Within minutes, his massive dreadnoughts found their defensive capabilities severely compromised. "Those are Marine pilots," Rodriguez explained conversationally. "Every one of them is trained for scenarios exactly like this. They know your ship configurations, your weapon placements, your blind spots. They've practiced this attack run 1,000 times in simulation." Impossible, Zethkar muttered. You've never faced Imperial ships before. No, but we've faced the next best thing. You see, Admiral, when we discovered that your empire existed, we didn't just prepare diplomatically. We prepared militarily. We built target drones that matched your ship specifications. We created training scenarios based on your tactical doctrines. We've been preparing for this battle since the day we knew you might come. The Imperial fleet, despite its massive size advantage, found itself increasingly on the defensive. Human tactics were unlike anything in the galactic military database. They used the asteroid belt as cover, employed gravitational slingshots around planets to gain impossible velocities, and coordinated their attacks across light minutes of space with timing that seemed almost supernatural. Sir, the science officer called out urgently. I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the system. The humans appear to be powering some form of defensive grid. What kind of defensive grid? Before anyone could answer, space around Earth began to shimmer. What had appeared to be empty space revealed itself to be filled with installations that had been completely invisible to Imperial sensors. Massive platforms armed with weapons that dwarfed even the Imperial fleet's main guns. Space fortresses that had been hidden in the shadow of Earth's moon. Gun stations that had been disguised as asteroids. My God, whispered the tactical officer. It's the entire system. The whole Sol system is one massive fortress. Admiral Chen's voice returned to the communication channel. Admiral Zethkar, I want you to understand something about humanity. We are not a warrior species by nature. We prefer to build rather than destroy, to explore rather than conquer. But we have learned something through our history that your empire apparently has not. And what is that? Zethkar asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would not comfort him. Sometimes, to preserve peace, you must be prepared for war. Sometimes, to protect what you love, you must become what you fear. And sometimes, Admiral, the most dangerous enemy is the one who fights not because they love battle, but because they love what they're protecting more than they fear dying. The massive defensive platforms around Earth powered up their weapons, and Zethkar realized that his fleet was not the predator in this encounter. They were the prey, and they had walked willingly into a trap that had been 3 months in the making. General Rodriguez appeared on screen one final time. Admiral, I'm going to give you one chance to withdraw. Not because we can't destroy your fleet, but because those Marines I mentioned, they don't just fight in space. And if you force us to board your ships, I promise you that the experience will be educational in ways you cannot imagine. Admiral Zethkar's 4 hands trembled as he processed General Rodriguez's ultimatum. Around him, the bridge of the Eternal Dominion buzzed with panicked reports from ships across the Imperial fleet. What should have been a simple conquest had turned into a nightmare of precision strikes and tactical superiority. Sir, we're receiving damage reports from 43 vessels. Communications Officer Veltan announced, his voice cracking. The humans are targeting our engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. They're not trying to destroy us quickly. They're disabling us deliberately. They're toying with us, Zethkar realized with growing fury and fear. A truly inferior species would either flee or throw everything into a desperate attack. These humans are fighting like they have all the time in the world. On the main display, Admiral Chun leaned forward. Admiral Zethkar, I notice you haven't responded to General Rodriguez's offer. I'll add my own perspective to her generous terms. Withdraw now, and we'll allow your fleet to leave intact. Continue this engagement, and we'll demonstrate why Marines have a saying. The few, the proud, the Marines. Zitkars mandibles klikt in anger. You think your primitive tactics frighten the Galactic Imperial Navy? We have conquered 47 star systems. My fleet has weapons that can crack planets. Yes, Admiral Chun agreed calmly. But can you use them when Marines are aboard your ships? Before Zethkar could ask what Chun meant, his tactical officer let out a strangled warning. Sir, multiple hull breaches across the fleet. Something is cutting through our armor like it's paper. The main screen shifted to show feeds from security cameras throughout the Imperial fleet. What Zethkar saw defied everything he understood about space combat. Human soldiers, somehow alive in the vacuum of space, were cutting their way directly through the hulls of Imperial ships. They wore armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal, and they moved with a coordination that spoke of extensive zero-gravity combat training. Impossible, breathed the science officer. How are they surviving in vacuum? How did they get to our ships without us detecting them? General Rodriguez answered as if she could hear the conversation. Powered armor with integrated life support, Admiral. And as for detection, well, Marines specialize in getting places they're not supposed to be. We call it infiltration. You might want to look that term up in your tactical database. On one security feed, a team of 4 human Marines had breached the hull of the cruiser Bloodfawn. The aliens who rushed to repel the boarders outnumbered the humans 10-1, but it didn't matter. The Marines moved like a single organism, covering each other's movements while their weapons cut through alien armor with devastating efficiency. One human would lay down covering fire while another advanced. They used the ship's own corridors against the defenders, creating choke points and kill zones with tactical expertise that left Zethkar stunned. Sir, the tactical officer reported with growing panic. The Marines aboard the Bloodfawn have reached the bridge. Captain Mordak is requesting terms of surrender. Surrender? Zethkar reived. To 4 humans? The answer came from another security feed. The Marines had indeed reached the cruiser's bridge, but they hadn't simply killed the crew. Instead, they had systematically disabled the ship's weapon systems, taken control of navigation, and were now broadcasting surrender terms in perfect Imperial standard. The lead Marine, identified by slightly different markings on his armor, stepped forward and removed his helmet. The human face that appeared was young, probably barely an adult by their species standards. But his eyes held something that made Zethkar's combat instincts scream warnings. This was not the face of a peaceful diplomat or reluctant defender. This was the face of someone who had been trained to excel at violence, and who took professional pride in that skill. Imperial Vessel Bloodfawn, the young Marine announced clearly. I am Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson, United States Marine Corps. Your ship is now under Marine control. Your weapons are disabled, your engines are offline, and your crew is secured. You have 60 seconds to signal your complete surrender to the flagship, or we will demonstrate what Marines do to hostile vessels. Captain Mordak, a veteran of 23 successful conquests, looked at the 4 humans who had captured his ship and spoke in a voice filled with disbelief. Ow! We are 300 crew members. You are 4 beings. Staff Sergeant Thompson's expression never changed. Sir, with respect, you're 300 crew members who've never faced Marines. We are 4 Marines who've trained for exactly this scenario since we were 18 years old. Your crew fought bravely, but they fought individually. We fight as a unit. Your people panicked when boarded. We've drilled boarding actions so many times we could do it in our sleep. The security feed from another ship showed a similar scene playing out aboard the destroyer Ironclaw. 6 Marines had somehow infiltrated the vessel and were systematically working their way toward engineering. But what caught Zethkar's attention was how they moved. The humans didn't advance recklessly or rely on superior firepower. They moved with the patience of natural predators, using every piece of cover, coordinating their advance with hand signals that spoke of extensive training together. One of the Marines, a female by the looks of her armor configuration, paused at a junction and held up a closed fist. The entire team stopped instantly. She pointed toward a side corridor and made several quick gestures. 2 Marines immediately moved to flank whatever she had detected while the others prepared to provide covering fire. When Imperial Marines attempted to ambush them from the side corridor, they found themselves facing humans who had anticipated their exact plan. Sir, Communications Officer Veltan announced, his voice now openly terrified, we're receiving surrender signals from 12 ships. The Marines aren't killing the crews, but they're systematically capturing entire vessels with teams of 4 to 6 individuals. Zethkar stared at the tactical display in growing horror. Red markers indicated ships that had fallen under Marine control. The pattern was becoming clear. The Marines weren't boarding randomly. They were targeting specific vessels in a coordinated pattern that would maximize the psychological impact on the rest of the fleet. They're not just fighting tactically, he realized aloud. They're fighting psychologically. They want the rest of us to see what's happening to the captured ships. General Rodriguez's voice confirmed his fears. Very perceptive, Admiral. You see, Marines don't just train to win battles. We train to win wars. And sometimes the fastest way to end a war is to demonstrate that resistance is futile. Your crews are brave, but they've never faced an enemy that's been training for their specific weaknesses. Another security feed caught Zethkar's attention. This one showed Marines aboard the battlecruiser Starfire, but something was different. The Imperial crew wasn't just surrendering. They were actively helping the Marines navigate the ship. What are they doing? Zethkar demanded. The answer came from Captain Kextal of the Starfire himself. Admiral, these humans, they're not what we expected. They've taken control of my ship, but they're providing medical aid to my wounded crew. They've been treating prisoners according to what they call the Geneva Conventions. They're acting with more honor than many Imperial units. Staff Sergeant Thompson's voice came through the communication channel. Admiral Zethkar, I think there's something you need to understand about Marines. We don't fight because we enjoy killing. We fight because we're protecting something. That means we have rules. We don't harm prisoners. We provide medical aid to wounded enemies. And we treat conquered populations with respect. But make no mistake, sir. Those same rules that protect your crews will not prevent us from destroying every ship in your fleet if you continue this engagement. The tactical display updated again. More ships were signaling surrender, but others were attempting to form defensive formations. Zethkar watched as the remaining free ships tried to coordinate a counterattack against the human vessels that were still darting through the Imperial formation. It was a disaster. The human ships seemed to anticipate every Imperial move. When the cruiser Void Hunter attempted to target a human destroyer, 3 human fighter squadrons appeared from nowhere and disabled its weapon batteries before it could fire. When the Dreadnought Galaxy's Edge tried to use its massive main gun, human infiltrators aboard 3 nearby ships simultaneously disabled their navigation, causing them to drift into the weapon's firing line. They're not just fighting us, Zethkar whispered. They're conducting this entire battle like a training exercise. They knew exactly what we would do before we did it. Admiral Chen appeared on the main screen again. Admiral Zethkar, I want to share something with you. For the past 3 months, since our first contact with your scouts, we've been preparing for this moment. Our military analysts have studied every available record of Imperial tactics. We've run thousands of simulations of this exact scenario. We've trained our Marines specifically to board and capture Imperial vessels. This isn't a desperate defense, Admiral. This is a final examination, and your fleet is the test. The implications of Chen's words hit Zethkar like a physical blow. You've been planning this from the beginning. Of course we have. Did you think we would simply accept conquest? Did you believe that a species capable of reaching the stars would be incapable of defending itself? Admiral, humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters that would have destroyed lesser species. We didn't achieve that through luck or divine intervention. We achieved it through our ability to adapt, to plan, and to never give up. General Rodriguez added her perspective. Admiral, I want you to consider something. In your military culture, how long does it take to train a soldier? Zethkar considered the question. Imperial Marines receive 6 months of basic training. 6 months, Rodriguez repeated thoughtfully. The Marines currently aboard your ships received 13 weeks of basic training, followed by additional specialized training that lasted anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. But that's just the beginning. These Marines have been training together as units for years. They know each other's strengths, weaknesses, and fighting styles better than they know their own families. A new alarm sounded across the Eternal Dominion S bridge. "Sir, we're detecting human infiltrators approaching our own ship," the security chief reported. "Multiple contacts moving through the superstructure. They appear to be using some form of magnetic grapples to climb along the hull." Zethkar felt his four hearts racing as he realized the implication. "They're coming for the flagship." "Of course they are," General Rodriguez confirmed. "Admiral, did you really think we'd leave the command vessel alone? Staff Sergeant Williams and her team have been assigned to capture you personally. I suggest you prepare for visitors. Marines don't knock." Through the bridge's reinforced viewports, Zethkar could see flashes of light as cutting tools worked their way through the ship's outer hull. The humans were coming for him, and, based on everything he had witnessed, his crew would be helpless to stop them. "Sir," Communications Officer Veltan said quietly, "perhaps it's time to consider surrender terms." Zethkar stared at the tactical display, showing the systematic capture of his fleet by forces he had dismissed as primitive. For the first time in his military career, he was beginning to understand that there were forms of strength that couldn't be measured in ship tonnage or weapon yield. The humans were about to teach him what Marines meant when they said Semper Fidelis. The cutting tools reached the Eternal Dominion S bridge just as Admiral Zethkar finished reviewing his final options. Around him, his senior staff waited with weapons drawn, though after witnessing what had happened to the rest of the fleet, their confidence had evaporated. The Imperial Navy's most experienced combat officers were about to face an enemy they didn't understand using tactics they'd never encountered. "All stations prepare to repel boarders," Zethkar commanded, though his voice lacked conviction. "Deploy internal security teams to the bridge approaches. Seal all bulkheads." The first hull breach appeared near the main tactical station, a perfect circular cut that fell inward with mechanical precision. Smoke and atmosphere rushed through the opening, but instead of the expected assault, a small device rolled through the hole. It beeped twice before releasing a cloud of dense, metallic fog that filled the bridge within seconds. "Gas masks," the security chief shouted, but the fog wasn't a chemical weapon. It was some form of electronic countermeasure that interfered with their targeting systems and visual displays. The bridge personnel found themselves effectively blind while maintaining breathable atmosphere. When the fog cleared 30 seconds later, 6 figures in powered armor stood positioned throughout the bridge. They had infiltrated so quietly that no one had heard them enter. Each Marine covered a different section of the bridge with weapons that hummed with deadly energy, but none of them had fired. The lead Marine, distinguished by slightly different armor markings, stepped forward and removed her helmet. The face revealed was that of a human female, probably in her early 30s, with the same unsettling confidence that Zethkar had seen in the other Marine commanders. "Admiral Zethkar," she announced in clear Imperial Standard, "I am Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams, United States Marine Corps. By order of the United Earth Defense Force, you and your crew are now prisoners of war. Please order your personnel to lay down their weapons." Zitkarst Mandibles klikt in disbelief. 6 beings. You think 6 beings can capture the crew of a dreadnought? Staff Sergeant Williams tilted her head slightly, as if considering an interesting question. "Admiral, with respect, we just did. Your ship's weapons are offline, your engines have been disabled, and your communications are under our control. Your crew can choose to surrender peacefully, or we can demonstrate why Marines train for hostile boarding actions." The security chief, a battle-scarred veteran named Grixtar, raised his plasma rifle toward the nearest Marine. "I fought across 17 systems. I won't surrender to humans." Williams never moved, but one of her Marines shifted position with fluid grace. The human's weapon discharged once with a sound like controlled lightning. Grixtar's plasma rifle simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that he stared at his empty hands in shock. The Marine's weapon had fired with such precision that it destroyed the rifle without harming the being holding it. "Grixtar, was it?" Williams asked conversationally. "I understand your reluctance to surrender. You're a career soldier who's never lost a battle. But you've never fought Marines before. We don't win through superior numbers or overwhelming firepower. We win through superior training, superior tactics, and superior dedication to our mission. She gestured toward the tactical display, which was now showing feeds from throughout the Imperial fleet. Admiral, would you like to see what's happening to the rest of your vessels? The display updated to show dozens of different scenes. On ship after ship, small teams of Marines had accomplished what should have been impossible. They had captured vessels crewed by hundreds with teams of less than 10. But what impressed Zethkar most wasn't the speed of their victories. It was how they treated the defeated crews. On the cruiser Bloodfang, Marines were providing medical aid to wounded Imperial personnel. On the destroyer Ironclaw, human soldiers were sharing their emergency rations with alien prisoners. Throughout the fleet, Marines were demonstrating the same professional courtesy and respect for life that had characterized their initial diplomatic contacts. You treat your enemies well, Zethkar observed. They're not our enemies anymore, Staff Sergeant Williams replied. They're prisoners of war, and they'll be treated according to our military code of conduct. We'll provide medical care, adequate food, and respectful treatment. When this conflict is resolved, they'll be repatriated to their home worlds with full honors. Communications Officer Veltan spoke up hesitantly. Why? Your victory is complete. You could do anything you wished with us. Another Marine, this one a male with corporal insignia, answered the question. Because that's not what Marines do, sir. We fight hard, but we fight honorably. Our mission is to protect Earth and defeat hostile forces, not to commit genocide or abuse prisoners. Admiral Chen's voice echoed through the bridge's communication system. Admiral Zethkar, I think it's time we discuss terms. Not surrender terms, but something more constructive. What do you mean? Zethkar asked. Your empire sent you here because your intelligence suggested we were weak. That assessment was incorrect, but it was based on reasonable observations. We prefer diplomacy to warfare. We choose negotiation over conquest. These aren't weaknesses, Admiral. They're choices made by a species that understands the true cost of war. General Rodriguez's image appeared alongside Admiral Chen's on the main display. Admiral, I want you to understand something about the Marines who just captured your fleet. Every one of them volunteered for military service. They chose to dedicate years of their lives to training for combat. They chose to accept the risk of death to protect their homeworld. But ask any of them what they really want to do, and they'll tell you they'd rather be home with their families. Staff Sergeant Williams nodded in agreement. The general's right, sir. I have a 6-year-old daughter named Emma who draws pictures of spaceships and dreams of exploring other worlds. I'd rather be home, reading her bedtime stories, than capturing alien vessels. But when someone threatens our world, Marines stand up. That's what we do. Zethkar studied the human faces surrounding him. These beings had just accomplished one of the most impressive military victories in galactic history, but they showed no signs of bloodlust or conquest fever. They looked tired, professional, and somehow sad. You take no joy in victory? He asked. Victory means the fighting is over, Williams replied. Of course we're glad about that, but victory also means people died today. Our people and your people. Marines celebrate completing the mission, Admiral. We don't celebrate death. Admiral Chun continued the conversation. Admiral Zethkar, your empire is vast and powerful. Earth is one small world with limited resources. We have no desire for galactic conquest, and we pose no threat to Imperial territory. But we've demonstrated today that attacking us carries a cost that outweighs any possible benefit. What are you proposing? Zethkar asked. A treaty, Admiral Chen replied. Humanity will respect Imperial sovereignty and refrain from expansion into Imperial space. In exchange, the Empire will recognize Earth as an independent world and agree to peaceful coexistence. General Rodriguez added her perspective. Admiral, your empire has conquered 47 star systems through military force. We've just demonstrated that the 48th will not be won the same way. But that doesn't mean we have to be enemies. Marines are trained for war, but they're also trained for peacekeeping. We could be allies instead of adversaries. Zethkar considered the proposal while studying the Marines who had captured his flagship. 6 humans had infiltrated and conquered a dreadnought crewed by over 1,000 Imperial personnel. They had done it without unnecessary casualties, without causing excessive damage, and without showing any signs of the sadistic behavior that typically accompanied overwhelming military victory. Your forces are impressive, he admitted, but you are one world against an empire of thousands. Other fleets will come. Staff Sergeant Williams stepped forward. Admiral, with respect, that's exactly what we're counting on. What do you mean? Williams gestured toward the tactical display, which now showed the entire Sol system. The defensive installations that had remained hidden throughout the battle were fully revealed now, and their scope was staggering. Earth wasn't just defended. The entire solar system had been converted into a fortress that could accommodate fleets far larger than the one Zethkar had brought. Sir, you came here with 100 ships and the best intelligence your empire could provide. You thought you understood human capabilities. How many more ships do you think it would take to successfully invade a system where we've had 3 months to prepare specifically for Imperial tactics? Admiral Chun provided the answer. Our analysts estimate that a successful invasion would require approximately 3,000 Imperial vessels and would result in casualties exceeding 2 million personnel. The economic cost would bankrupt several Imperial sectors. The time investment would tie up Imperial forces for decades, all to conquer one world that offers minimal strategic value and maximum defensive capability. Furthermore, General Rodriguez added, every ship your empire sends to Sol is a ship that can't be used to maintain control over your existing territories. How many of your subject worlds might view a prolonged, costly war with Earth as an opportunity to declare independence? Zethkar realized the humans had outmaneuvered the Empire on multiple levels. They had demonstrated superior tactical abilities, revealed defensive capabilities that made conquest prohibitively expensive, and identified strategic vulnerabilities that could threaten Imperial stability throughout the galaxy. You've been planning this conversation since before my fleet arrived, he said. Of course we have, Admiral Chin confirmed. Admiral, humanity survived as a species because we learned to think several steps ahead. We don't just react to threats. We anticipate them, prepare for them, and develop solutions that serve everyone's best interests. Staff Sergeant Williams removed a small device from her armor and placed it on the tactical console. Admiral Zethkar, this contains the complete records of today's engagement. Every tactic we used, every weapon we deployed, every strategy we employed. It's all there. Zethkar stared at the device in shock. Why would you give us your military secrets? Because they're not secrets anymore, Williams replied. You've seen everything. Your surviving crews have witnessed our capabilities. But, more importantly, this information will help you convince your superiors that Earth is not worth conquering. The cost in ships, personnel, and resources would exceed any possible gain. General Rodriguez appeared on the main screen one final time. Admiral, Marines have a saying, adapt, improvise, and overcome. We've adapted to the reality of galactic civilization. We've improvised solutions to the challenges that presents. And today we've overcome a threat to our homeworld. But our goal was never to humiliate your empire or destroy your fleet. Our goal was to ensure that Earth remains free. Admiral Chun concluded the conversation. Admiral Zethkar, you came here expecting to find a weak species that feared battle. Instead, you found humans who prefer peace, but excel at war. Take that message back to your empire. Tell them that Earth offers friendship to those who approach in peace, but death to those who come as conquerors. As the Marines began the process of transferring the captured Imperial crews to temporary holding facilities, Zethkar realized that humanity had achieved something no other species in galactic history had accomplished. They had turned a military defeat into a diplomatic victory, transforming a potential conquest into the foundation for peaceful coexistence. The humans had been right about one thing. They truly did fear battle, but they feared the loss of freedom more.